Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Morning Coffee with Cameron. In today's video, we're here to continue on with the Future Garage Mega Series, and in this video, we're going to be talking about creating pads and atmospheres, which I would argue is probably the most important part of this genre and also probably one of the hardest things to get right. Like I talked about in part 1, the overall mood and aesthetic and vibe of Future Garage is really the most important thing to this genre as a whole. It's all about establishing that feeling and that vibe and that space and the world that a track sits in. Keep in mind, there's more than one way to skin a cat, so by no means is this the hard and fast rule set that you have to follow to create these types of atmospheric elements. I just wanted to show you guys a few of my favorite approaches, talk about some techniques and tips and tricks, and you guys can just take this as an idea and run with it. There's a lot of different ways to approach doing this, and it's all about just creating a sound that sounds good in the end. It really doesn't matter how you get from A to B. If you're looking for some pads and stuff to kickstart an idea or maybe just some raw material to work with and process further, I have some free sample packs on my website that have pads. Specifically, Ava Noir has a lot of Future Garage textural pads. I also have Phantom, which is a kind of sequel to that Ava Noir pack that also has a bunch of, pads and ambiences and atmospheric elements that you can use. That said, in today's video, I'm going to show you how I approach making these sounds from the ground up using a variety of techniques and processing and all that kind of stuff, so let's dive in and get started. Okay, so today I'm going to show you guys how I like to create atmospheres using a few different types of synthesizers. We're going to be using a subtractive synth, an FM synth, we're going to be doing some resynthesis, we're going to be doing some granular stuff, and as a bonus tip, I wanted to show you guys how you can create really cool pads and atmospheric stuff by utilizing a vocoder and found sound. I'll also be showing you how you can take all these sounds to create the final atmospheric product. So let's go ahead and break things down first with the synthesis side of things, because pad sounds themselves aren't really that hard. It's just getting the big atmospheric, moody, broody stuff that I think takes a little more practice and effort. So let's go ahead and dive in here and first take a look at a subtractive synth pad. So I've got Dune 3 up here. This is a pad I made for a sound bank I'm working on for Dune 3 that's going to come out eventually someday, but I thought this was a good sound just to demonstrate kind of the overall sonic qualities that we want to go for these types of, genres and moods and stuff. So let's take a listen to the pad and then I'll break it down. So a very big, almost retro pad. It kind of has that Blade Runner type of feel to it, but whatever. So let's go ahead and break this down here. So I've got 3 different things going on, as you can see in the mixer. I have oscillator 1, 2, and 3, and then I have ring modulation happening. So oscillator 1 here is 17 voices. It's pretty detuned and spread out really wide. This is a wavetable, and I just drew this in. It's kind of like a half triangle, half saw, half squarish thing, which I don't know, I guess I would call this my man bear pig of wavetables. So it's not moving around or anything, it's just a nice shape that has kind of a cool character to it. Over in oscillator 2, I've got 4 square waves. These are detuned and spread out relatively wide. Oscillator 3 is a triangle. This is an octave down. So this just provides a bit more substantial weight to the overall patch. However, you could entirely disable this by turning down oscillator 3 within your mixer. Otherwise, it's just something to consider. Sometimes it's nice to add a sine or a triangle to a pad just to give it a bit more, junk in its trunk on the lower end. As you can see, ring modulation is happening here. This is ring modulation for oscillator 1 and 2. This is just adding a bit of kind of grit and character. It's something to experiment with in Dune 3 with if you have it. Otherwise, if your synth offers ring modulation, play around with it. It can add some cool texture and character. Other than that, there's really not a whole lot going on here. There's not any unison or anything else happening really. There's some effects and a filter. That's pretty much it. The real magic of subtractive synth pads I find is in the envelopes. That's really where you get all the character from. So here I've utilized the filter envelope quite a bit, as you can see right here. And this is a very slow attack, decay, and release. And it has no sustain. So it opens up and kind of closes off. And that's pretty much what I wanted it to do. The cutoff is set really, really low here. Just a touch of resonance and a whole lot of drive. This really gives this pad a lot of, character and weight to it. So envelope amount, just experiment with it. Other than that, the amplitude envelope, very similar thing here. I've got a long attack, decay, and release. That way I can get some nice, swelling chords that, move in and out behind the track and just, almost act in a way as a rhythmic and transitional element. You know, when each chord happens, it's not a consistent level the whole time. It's kind of, you know, big hit, decay, and so on and so on. So it just helps provide movement. In terms of effects, there's not too much happening. There's a chorus, and it's just a pretty straightforward chorus, not really anything crazy happening, and just a nice big reverb. This is large. Hall time is up pretty high, blended in quite a bit. This is just a nice big spacey reverb, and then I added a little bit of post-processing. First up here is Faturator from Kilohertz. This just adds some kind of nice chunky character, mixed it in really, really low. Otherwise, this is a very extreme distortion. So mixing it in low can add just a nice bit of breakup and crunch to your pads. And then an EQ here, this is just kind of taming the overall sound. Without the EQ on here, it sounds like this. Which is really, really cool, but I think it's a bit overwhelming for the role it needs to play in the track. So I'm cutting out a lot of that low-end information, some of that extra high fizzy stuff, and then just a touch of mid-range here just to make it not so nasally, I guess. And that's a great way to make a very basic pad that just about any synth can do. So subtractive synths are really, really great. They're very powerful if you know how to sit there and patch something together. Just about every DAW comes with one. And then, you know, with a little bit of chorus and reverb and stuff, you can make a really big, epic pad. However, let's move on to something a bit more interesting and complicated using FM. All right, so here we are with Parawave Rapid. This is a badass synthesizer for pads and stuff. It's actually going to be used in the Resynthesis example here as well. So this is a pretty straightforward FME type patch, and I basically stole this idea from all of my pad sounds that I've created on my Novation Peak, because the Rapid synth is pretty much a Peak just on steroids. So what we've got going on here is 3 different oscillators. They're all moving around and just, you know, changing and morphing a tiny bit. And all that you're actually going to hear is oscillator A. So I'm going to go ahead and play the sound, and then we'll break it down. A really, really cool sound. I love creating pads this way. Like I said, my Novation Peak, this is pretty much every one of my pad patches just remade in Rapid. So yeah, we're only hearing oscillator A, and it's just such a thick sound, and there's so much movement and character, which is what I really love about using Rapid for this stuff. So oscillator B is just a straight up sine wave. This is basic 1, and it's getting a little bit of modulation applied, and that's really where the magic of this type of pad sound comes in. It's all about that modulation. Oscillator C here is a wavetable. This is Clark 1, just kind of a weird wavetable. It had some nice spiky bits in it. And that's what I look for a lot of the time when I'm doing these types of FME pad sounds, is a wavetable or something with just that kind of spiky stuff to it, because it adds a lot of kind of gritty texture and stuff overall. So over here, I set the phase modulation from oscillator to be the effect type, and we're getting from B and from C. Now do keep in mind, C and B are both feeding directly into A. It's not going C into B and then B into A, although you could do that. In this case, they're both feeding in just directly to A, which creates a very different sound than doing it the other way. However, that is something to experiment with. As you can see here with this little pink indicator, this is also being modulated, which creates a lot more character and stuff. Beyond that, I just detune these ever so slightly with the scent or fine control, and this creates just a nice warbly movement, just a bit of a different character than you would get from just a straight up, you know, everything perfectly in tune all the time. And then oscillator C here is down 1 octave. Again, just experiment with this kind of stuff, you know, tune it up a fifth, tune it up an octave, tune it down 2 octaves, you know, something will change the character, might as well experiment with it and see what you get. In terms of the filter up here, this is a 24 decibel per octave low pass. Treble is up just a touch. This just adds a bit of, you know, high frequency stuff back in. Resonance is relatively high, and the cutoff here is a little bit under noon, so probably like 11:30. There's no actual value, so I don't know what that is, but somewhere around there. And then that's being modulated as well. Down here we have the effects. I have a chorus. This is a pretty wet, like gooey chorus effect. I really like the chorus in Rapid. This feeds into a bit crush. It's mixed in, you know, 20-ish%. It's not doing too much, just adds a bit of kind of crinkly texture up top. And then that feeds into reverb, which is Nova here in the size or algorithm, I suppose. Decay is really high, mixed in about 50-50. It's just an amazing reverb inside of Rapid. So let's talk about modulation here, because this is really what's important. I'm using all the LFOs. LFOs are super, super good for this stuff. So as you can see down here, LFO A is targeting the filter cutoff. LFO B is targeting the oscillator A effects factor. So this B here is targeting right here is from C. And then C over here is also targeting this. This is going to from B and just a wider amount here. And then that's pretty much it. I didn't use LFO-D for anything. So LFO-C is also tied to the morph or index of oscillator C's wavetable. And LFO-A is over here tied to oscillator B morph or index of the wavetable. So this just provides a whole bunch of movement, and that's something to experiment with. You know, just assign LFOs and envelopes to stuff. The LFOs don't have to be sine wave waveforms either. Try random waveforms, or you know, even like a sample and hold, where it's like a stair-stepping effect. You can get a whole lot of different character and, you know, texture out of pads from just messing with LFOs and assigning them to different things. It's a very, very important step to make sure your pads aren't just kind of static and boring. So let's close this guy out here and take a look at the post-processing. Not a whole lot going on. Hornet Tape. You need to go buy this plugin if you don't own it. American 15 here, so this is 15 inches per second on a, I don't know, Studer or something looking console there. Here I've got Corrosion, which is another Hornet plugin. This is on Sine. This is essentially erosion from Ableton. So if you have Ableton, you can skip this. Otherwise, I would highly recommend this plugin. So this is at 1.4K or thereabouts, about 5%. Without tape and corrosion applied, it still sounds really good. It just sounds different. So let's take a listen without those. And let's turn them on. So tape and corrosion, they add just kind of some saturation and grit to the whole thing. Let's take a listen. So just a bit more texture, and I guess, you know, like I talked about in part one, it just adds a bit of emotional value to this sound. You know, it doesn't sound kind of synthy and perfect. You know, it has a bit of character and something extra going on that your ear really, you know, picks up on and says, oh, that's kind of a cool sound. So, you know, just adding subtle little bits of stuff on top of pads can really make all the difference. Okay, let's move on to Resynthesis, which is a bit more of an advanced thing, and not all synthesizers can do this. However, if you have Serum or anything else that allows you to drag audio in and it will create a wavetable or a sound from it, that's what Resynthesis is. So let's go ahead and take a look at what I made with that. So we've got Rapid once again here. I grabbed a vocal sound from my decomposition pack that's free on my website. You can go pick it up if you don't have it. This is from Phantom, which is another sample pack on my website. You can pick that one up. This is one of the textures, which is just kind of a atonal noise thing that just, you know, creates some interesting stuff. And then here I have a atmospheric pad from my Mori sample pack. You can pick that one up as well if you need some pads and stuff. So I just dragged all these in and used the resynthesis mode in Rapid. And what this does is it takes a sound and rebuilds it, which just imparts a really interesting character to everything. So instead of, you know, vocal of like, ah, you get these weird tonal, breathy synth sounds. It's really hard to describe, but it sounds awesome. So there's not a whole lot actually happening here. This is a low pass 24. Filter cutoff is being affected by LFO-A. Just some reverb. I got the space reverb. It's a big reverb. Ensemble, which is a multi-voice chorus effect, also very handy for pads. And then a shaper, which is just a little bit of distortion, just to dirty up kind of the reverb tail and the sound as a whole. There's a little bit of filter resonance here, not too much, and it just creates a really unique sound. Check it out. Now, I find the resynthesis stuff very useful for just kind of holding a single note. So this is more of like a way to create a droning element, I suppose. So if I play a really low note and just kind of hold it out, you'll hear what I mean. So with the LFO and stuff moving around, it's a really cool way to create some interesting texture. If you don't have Rapid or a synth capable of resynthesis, I highly recommend picking one up because this is a really cool way to create some super interesting sounds that I don't really think you can make any other way. It's just a really unique character that you can get out of synths that allow you to do something like that. So in terms of post-processing, not a whole lot. EQ, just adding some air, and getting rid of some resonance stuff down here, getting rid of some low end, because it's just ultimately going to be unnecessary once we had a big, mean bass line under it. Camel fat, not really important, just, like what camel fat does to some sounds. So this is just adding some kind of crunch and grit overall. And then finally, this feeds into a Tau Reverb 4. This is just a huge, very wet reverb. Brought up the low cut a bit just to get rid of some mud. That's pretty much it. It just, adds a lot of space, and the distortion just adds that bit of crunch just to make it a bit more sonically interesting. So moving right along, let's talk about granular synths and stuff, which is my favorite way to create these types of atmospheric soundscapey things. So I'm going to show you how I built what I threw into a granular synth, and then show you how to make stuff using a granular synth. So let's go ahead and break that down. So the final result is this pad right here. If you've listened to any of my music, you know this sound right away because this is how I create like all of my pads and stuff. So, okay, let's break down how this was made. This is actually made up of several different kind of layers and stuff. Then I bounce that out and then I drop that into a granular thing, and out comes something epic and beautiful like that sound there. So in this folder is granular materials. This is everything that was used to create that sound you just heard. If I play this stuff together, it sounds like this. And that's all that it took to make that huge, epic sound. So basically when I'm doing this type of stuff, what I do is I'll create kind of a melodic, droning motif, thing. It doesn't really matter all that much what I'm doing because it's just going to get stretched and pulled apart to oblivion anyway. But basically what I like to do is I'll create kind of a minor loop, or major loop if the song is going to be in a major key. And I'm not really doing all that much beyond kind of playing a minor chord off the root of the song. So in this case, I just did a little kind of loop in F minor, and I'm just playing the 1, the 3, the 5, hitting the 7 here and there, hitting the 2 and the 4, just to give it that bit more abstract feel. If you don't know about scale degrees and stuff, go to musictheory.net. That's pretty much it, just creating a little loop and layering different sounds to fill out the overall sonic spectrum. So let's go ahead and break down each sound here. So first up, as I'm sure you could hear, there's just a piano. That's pretty much all there is to this sound. And as you can see here, I'm just kind of playing a little motif across, 2 octaves, not really anything too crazy. Brought a tool in here just to bring up the volume because it's very quiet. And then an oral river here. This is just a like 4.5 second reverb. This just adds a bit of space and character. Otherwise, the piano is just maybe a bit dry. Without that, it sounds like this. Which is okay, maybe a bit too transient-y. And then the piano itself, in case you're curious, is Arturia Piano V. This is a preset I made for myself called Cameron's Piano 4. That was kind of the base of the whole thing. Pianos are a great sound because they have a pretty wide frequency response, but they have a nice kind of clear, distinct sound that I find lends itself well to creating granular atmospheric stuff because it's just something that kind of cuts through the mix no matter what. Below that here, I have an instance of Rapid, and all I did is just kind of make a plucky, siny thing. This is a sine, and then just a chorus and a delay on it. So I'm kind of using this to just kind of fill out more of that kind of mid-rangey stuff. Also just provide some really clear tonal things, but also with that chorus, it just adds a bit of movement. So that sounds like this. That's pretty much it. So below that, I've got Expand 2 here. This is just one single sound. This is a ukulele, and it sounds like this. And this just layered really well with the piano, but that kind of finger plucky thing gives it a really nice kind of gritty, granular texture because we have a very clear, plucky transient. And you can hear it just complements the kind of sonic spectrum the piano fills. And that's pretty much it. Below that, there's one more instance of expand here, and this is what I like to call my filler layer. I always try to have like one filler layer in my pads just to fill out the rest of the spectrum, really, I guess is what I would call it. So if we crack this open here, got a koto, a something, and a sitar, and it sounds like this. Whoops, it sounds like this. And this is just kind of a low droning thing. So this is just adding some kind of lower end information, also some airy, higher stuff. Like I said, it's just a filler element is what I call it. And then sometimes beyond that, I might add like some vinyl crackle or something underneath this just for a bit of kind of crinkly top end texture. But in this case, I thought it was fine without it because, you know, especially with the plucky transient stuff going on, that provides some of that kind of grittier stuff up on the top end. So once that was done, I bounced it out here. So this is everything put together. And that's what I used to make the pad. So how I actually did that is with the lovely and beautiful UVI Falcon 2. So I dragged this into an IRCam multi-granular oscillator and then just kind of messed with the parameters a little bit. I didn't really change anything else inside of Falcon. I just made sure the root note here was on F2 or F3, just, you know, F. So that way if I decide to change the key of the song, I can just hold down different notes and it'll provide something else. Now the cool thing about this approach is instead of getting one droning note and you have to, like, you know, play different notes and chords and stuff to fill out your song, since you're already playing different notes and stuff and it's moving around, when you really slow it down, and especially when you have multiple grains going on, cutting out different portions of that, you get these really interesting movements and melodic changes to the pad that you don't really have to do anything to create. I just held down the same note an octave apart and boom, I get these huge epic textures. So inside of the granular oscillator here, I have 7 voices. Position spread is 8 seconds. Time spread is up by almost 70%. The size is 390 milliseconds, density of 4.5 or so. Jitter up pretty much all the way. Duration variation 50-60%. Pitch variation 0.4 cents, just, you know, moving things around a bit. You can move this up or down to get more of kind of a detuned warbly pad effect if you want to do that. Position here didn't really change anything, just upped the random and then slowed the speed way down. Because if you have it too fast, it just, I don't know, it sounds wrong. So if I have the speed just at 1 here, this is what we get. Which is cool, but it sounds too fast and it sounds like you can hear what's actually happening. So if I slow this way down to, like, you know, 0.07, you can hear we start to get this nice textural buildup and breakup of all the little grains moving around and being chopped and randomized and all that kind of stuff. So that's a great way to add just, you know, character and whatnot. So other than that, loop mode, forward, backward, and that's pretty much it. So I moved on to add some effects within Falcon. Diode Clipper just adds a nice bit of grit and breakup to the whole thing. Expander filter, this is just there in case I want to filter and automate the pad later on usually. Soft saturation by 4-ish dB or thereabouts. A little bit of resonance as well. That way if you move the filter, there's just a bit of character to the filter movement. Chorus here, 4 voices, that's just an ensemble chorus effect, and a big old spark verb, about 6 seconds mixed in 50-50 with the high decay up, just so we can really get those crispy high-end things going on. And that's really all that's going on within Falcon. So in terms of post-processing here, there's an EQ cutting out just some low rumbly stuff and just bringing up a bit of that lower mid region just for some warmth. And then lifting up here about 10K just to bring up again that crispy stuff that's really nice. And then I capped it all off with a Tal Reverb 4 here on the very end. Just pretty big, pretty wet, and, you know, just standard good old reverb. So as you can see here, I just held a G sharp 1 octave apart, and that creates that end result, which is really cool because like I said, we're already playing all the different notes and stuff, and it's all in the key. So this is just spreading it out, and since the grains, it's a multi-voice granular engine, all the grain positions are spread across this entire loop that I created. So we're getting different notes all at the same time that create, different chords and textures and movements and stuff. But since it's all in the key, it creates this epic droning element that kind of does the work for you, which I think is, a really awesome way to work because I'm pretty lazy. So that's pretty much it for pads and stuff. However, I wanted to show you guys how I like to make pads that move a lot, and a really cool way to do this utilizing a vocoder. So let's go ahead and take a look at how I've done that. So right here is that same Falcon pad, I just bounced it out. And then down here, I have some ambient recordings. So if we go to my samples, I have a folder called Noises and Ambiences. So this is one of my samples from the woods. And that's it. So the cool thing about a vocoder, if you know anything about how vocoders work, is there's a carrier and a modulator. So one sound is the carrier and one sound modulates that, carrier modulator. That's just the whole thing. So the cool thing is you can actually use a texture or a found sound field recording or whatever to play your pad for you. And this adds a lot of interesting dynamics and movement, and also vocoders impart kind of a weird, wacky character to things. So let's go ahead and take a listen to the final result, and I'll show you guys how I did it. So if we go ahead and solo this out, this is the vocoder pad. So it's that exact same Falcon sound, but it's being played by the ambient field recording. Which sounds so cool and adds a lot of character. And you'll hear if I actually just get rid of this one, let's find another found sound recording. Maybe we'll do the metal fence. Sure, that's got a lot of weird stuff going on. And we play that same thing back. We get a totally very annoying, but a completely different result, which is super, super cool. And this is a really, really great way to make these kind of textural ambient sounds that move around a bit more. So I didn't actually do anything to either of these sounds. I just put them together and threw on a vocoder. So I grabbed the Reason plugin here, and I'm using the B512, which is an amazing vocoder. So what I did is flip the rack around, and I routed things a bit differently. The left side is the carrier, and the right side is the modulator, and then the left goes out. So I get a mono pad, but we can add stereo stuff back in later on. So all I did is actually pan these. So audio 1 being the granular pad is actually just panned over all the way to the left, and then the ambience is panned over to the right. That way I get the carrier modulator relationship I was looking for. In terms of post-processing, I added an EQ, just kind of doing the same old thing, cutting low end, adding some low mid, adding some sparkle. I added a corrosion here. This is on noise, just adds a bit of texture. I have another corrosion here. This is on sine, and this is just adding some grit and stuff. Ladder here is a ladder filter, so I can use this to kind of filter the pad out or open it up. I have an oral river, which is just a big old 13-second reverb mixed in all the way wet here with the dry signal all the way up as well. Just adds a lot of space. And also, since it's a reverb, it's going to make it stereo again, which is really important. Right after the reverb, I have a stereo enhancer from PSP, so I'm just making this even more wide and atmospheric. And then capped it all off with one more EQ here, cleaning up some low-end stuff, cleaning out some high-end stuff, and getting rid of a couple resonant peaks that I didn't really care for. And that is how you can make these really epic vocoder atmospheric things. So I hope that provides a pretty comprehensive overview to how to make the initial pad sound. Now let's move on to how do we turn this into an actual atmospheric thing. So I'm going to show you guys the final result here, and then we can talk about how it was made. So let's go ahead and take a listen to the final epic atmospheric thing here. Which sounds pretty cool. If we get rid of the bass, the piano, and the pluck, I suppose this is kind of the overall atmospheric pad element. which is actually pretty straightforward. So I've got my big vocoder pad here. This is something I've been doing a lot lately since I got a hold of the Reason VST. So I used the vocoder pad, and then I just added in a couple other things. So I first layered in another pad, because layering and stuff in Future Garage is super, super important. You're not gonna get kind of the final result out of just a single synth patch more often than not. So I've got Rapid here. I actually copied the sine plucky thing and just played it again. I just adjusted the envelope a bit. We could actually probably stand to open up the attack so it's not as rough. But it's the same chorus and delay thing here that I used when creating the original Falcon pad. So just playing kind of some chords here and just leaving a G sharp droning on the whole time just to provide that kind of pedal tone. Then just layered up a couple bits of ambience and stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and mute this stuff here. We can take a listen to the ambiences. So first up here is just a loop of, I believe, me playing with a paper bag or something like that. If I take off the effects, you can actually hear the air conditioning running there, if you listen for it. Cutting out some low end here and then filtering off the high end. Just adds a nice kind of dark sound. Almost sounds like a lo-fi recording of rain too, which is really, really cool. So that just adds some kind of mood. Below that, I've got a recording of me walking around the woods, just outside my house. So without the effects here, I think this is actually me out walking the dog, really. So filtered off the high end again, a bit of resonance, filtering out some low end. And then I took a tool here just to make it not as wide, because it was kind of weirdly biased to the left side. And that's really it. Below that, I have a recording of a lake out in the woods. So this has a lot of effects on it. If I take these off, pretty straightforward. And what I first did is pitch this down, because if you pitch, field recordings and found sound down, you can get some really kind of gritty characteristics out of them. So if we pitch this down even further, maybe something like that, it just sounds really cool. So I've got a filter first, again, just filtering out some high end, a bit of resonance, cutting out some low end here, oral river just to add a bit of space and, character. And then one more EQ here, just cleaning up the low end again. There was just some stuff that the reverb adds that I didn't really like. Finally, to cap it all off here, I've just got some vinyl crackle. I just recorded some of my records off of my record player and just recorded the intro and ending of the record and stitched it together, and you get a nice straight up vinyl crackle. This could actually probably be a bit louder in the overall mix here. So you layer that up with your pads and stuff. So we have all those little ambience and things going on. We can go ahead and enable our pads. Really epic textural thing. You could add in, sounds of you breathing. You could record your heart beating with a contact mic or something. You could, record a voicemail or whatever, just all these things to create a space and a mood and a life for the track you're about to create. And this is how I always start my Future Garage tracks, is just getting the atmospheric stuff ready, because this really sets the stage and the tone and the vibe that I want to make with my track. So from there, I added in a piano, and this is just playing some chords and stuff for the song. I layered in a nice sine pluck. The sine pluck here was created with Dune 3, just a sine wave, and it's a pluck because I messed with the amplitude envelope. There's no effects or anything going on here, just straight up sine pluck. Fed that into a stomp delay and oral river. The stomp delay is a PSP delay. I love the way this delay sounds. It's just a big ping pong type sound. And then oral river, 4 second, pretty wet. The pluck sounds like this. So it's just kind of pinging off that piano melody. Finally, I added in my big, nice, dark, deep respace. And that's pretty much the whole track. I mean, I've got my whole idea here. I've got the atmosphere, I've got the chords, I've got everything starting to, get the ball going. So now we need to start adding drums and things like that. We need to do our arrangement, mix it all down, and then we're done. That's, a pretty straightforward way to approach creating this genre. And this is pretty much how I always do it. I get my atmospheric stuff, I throw in my bass line, and then I'm ready to start adding drums and arranging. So later on in the series, I'm also going to be covering some music theory concepts to show you how to create this type of melody and vibe and stuff like that, because I think there are some considerations that a lot of producers maybe just don't think about, and a lot of people maybe struggle with if they're not all that familiar with music theory and stuff, and how to create these dark, sad, moody vibes and whatnot. So we will be covering that later on, but I think that is going to do it for this video. So yeah, I think that does it for this video. So thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. Be sure to stay tuned for part 3. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys again soon.